stigma that exists now is every time when we think about someone with mental health condition, we are thinking about the extreme ends, where maybe there is someone yelling in the streets, or someone being very violent, or suicide and things like that. But a lot of times mental health issues and mental health conditions don't come up that way.
Welcome to Creating Wellness Moments, the podcast where we dive into the depths of the human psyche, self-discovery, and personal growth. I'm Calvin Wong, your host and fellow explorer on this journey towards mental well-being. Join me as we uncover inspiring stories, expert insights, and practical tips to cultivate a healthier and happier life. Get ready to embark on a transformative experience, one episode at a time. Let's create wellness moments together. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today for Creating Wellness Moments. We have a very special guest, Sharmain from Total Wellness Initiative Singapore. She's the co-founder, and they aim to promote and empower people to have a more holistic and preventative approach to caring for their personal wellness using a 10-dimension framework. So the 10 dimensions will be psychological, physical, spiritual, social, creative, intellectual, environmental, occupational, digital, and financial wellness. Is quite a mouthful. But in any case, they help a lot of schools and organizations to plan for their wellness, to prevent any kind of crisis to happen to begin with. In her day job, she has over 6 years of experience doing regional and global roles for organization to do development and design work. So she's implemented projects anywhere from 1,000 to 60,000 employees. So it's quite amazing. And thanks so much for being on the show.
No, thank you, Calvin. I really appreciate you having me here today. And yeah, it's quite a mouthful, but the idea was that, with the 10-dimensional wellness, people can find ways that resonate with them to care for themselves. So yeah, that's why it sounds like a lot.
Would you say it's important to have all 10 dimensions kind of, accomplished in your life, or you kind of tackle one at a time?
Yeah, so typically when we do talks and workshops, we typically tell people to choose about two to three that best resonate with them. And more often than not, sorry, most people tell us that, hey, actually a lot of the things they already want to do and already have done in their life is just putting more priority on it and spending more time on it. So it's not supposed to be like out of your normal routines. We hope that more people find better ways to care for themselves within their daily routines. And that's kind of how they can better do it and do it more often. And that's the thing, like with wellness, consistency is key, and doing it more frequently is key as well. So yeah, find something that you can do like 15, 20 minutes a day and just try to do it every day. If not, once every 2 days, or like 3 times, 4 times a week. So get into that rhythm, and then hopefully it sticks, and it becomes something that you do out of habit, and you don't have to think about it anymore.
True. So it's really more of finding a few things that kind of fit your lifestyle and some things that you want to improve
Yeah.
instead of just trying to take on something very overwhelming. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
Yeah. It's yeah, so can you just share a little bit about the story behind Total Wellness Initiative Singapore and how it became a thing, and a little bit about John, the co-founder as well?
Yeah, sure. So, myself and John, we come from very, very different backgrounds. I've always been in like the corporate side, not really, really into mental health till about 2 years ago, when I met John. John is a mental health researcher, so of course, his background and everything they have done in the past, 7, 8 years has been about mental health. So we met interestingly when I was exploring the mental health space because a lot of my friends were struggling with mental health issues during COVID. And yeah, I started off wanting to just join an organization, or a group or initiative that was looking at impacting mental health, mental wellness, or early childhood development. There were a few different tracks that I was exploring during that time, and I met John. We chatted, and yeah, we hit it off, and we felt like, hey, actually this 10-dimensional wellness idea makes a lot of sense because prevention is so important. A lot of my friends who are struggling with mental health condition, although like they are getting to a place now after 2 years, being able to, cope with their mental health struggles and cope with the mental health issues that they're facing, but it relapse. That's the thing about mental health. The moment there is an onset of a mental health condition, it's a bit difficult to reverse it. So that's why during our conversations, like John and I resonated a lot with like, hey, how can we help people support themselves better, support the people around them better, because social wellness is super important to create like the environment where like, hey, they know what to do, they can do it, and then it will stop them from reaching to a point where it's a bit more difficult to reverse once they have a mental health condition. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And
Mm,
I know you guys have a few programs that, touch on building these skill sets to allow people to better themselves.
mm.
Can you tell me a little bit about the programs you offer and what it looks like when you do these?
Yeah, sure. So we do have quite a few different type of programs, and honestly, depending on who comes to us to run a program with them, we tweak our program to better fit their audience and their beneficiaries or their people. Our flagship programs is one of them is called Rest for Wellness. So Rest for Wellness is a program that we worked with IMH to develop. So right now we are running it in different schools, so secondary schools, poly, unis, JCs. We do that for them as well, and I can tell you a little bit more about the different schools we work with in a bit, but I want to talk about the program first. So Rest for Wellness is this 10, 12-hour program where we look at, how do we address stigma in the society around mental health, the different mental health conditions, what are the, most common signs and symptoms of different mental health conditions. It's quite important because sometimes when you see it, you might want to get, support your friend or your family through, seeking professional help. And also it helps you create like empathy for an understanding of what people with different mental health conditions go through. Also myth and realities, really important when trying to reduce stigma. Yeah, and then the other really important stuff around, how do you communicate with people with mental health conditions? How do you, reach out for help? How do you support yourself and your friends through different, more difficult periods of your life? How does stress affect you and things like that? So it's a very comprehensive program. And the idea is that, once someone come out of the program, they really have a very good foundational understanding of what mental health is, and mental health illnesses are, or mental health conditions are. Yeah, so that's the first one. And then other programs that we do that are a bit more fun are like terrarium workshops, like mindfulness, meditation a little bit, but meditation less. We do normally breathing exercises, and also other things like coping with stress, managing stress. Yeah, those are like other programs that we come up with. There's also one more that is more of our basic understanding of mental health or wellness. I think that was more wellness related, but we have this called Wellness Planning Talk, where we have done it in different organizations like GovTech, like HP Aruba. So we do go to a few different corporates for that one, where they're trying to set like a baseline understanding of what wellness means within the organization. And so we go and we give them a talk and then help them understand what the 10 dimensions are, some ways to create a plan where they can cope with their triggers and things like that. Yeah, and then the last program that we have, this one is a program slash project, but we did it with NLB last year. So it's called Design for Wellness. So the idea of Design for Wellness is we wanted to co-create with the community, people around Singapore, what wellness means to them. So there are very, very cute like decals that were designed. So we got about 90 different submissions last year, over a span of 6 weeks, printed 350-ish A3 size decal, so pretty big. So if you are around the Woodlands area, I would recommend going to Woodlands NLV. On almost every table, there's one very big decal pasted. So what the aim of that decal is not just like this co-creation, what it means, what wellness means to you approach, but also the other thing is this non-intrusive way of getting people to reflect on wellness. So one of the feedbacks that we have been getting is like, hey, I don't really think about wellness in the 10 dimensions way. And it was very interesting and very cute because the decals are like super cute and eye-catching. Yeah, then I learned a lot from the decal, and I've used some of the methods in my life, and it kind of helps. So I don't know whether the people continue to do it, but at least from like a immediate eye-catching way, it has done that, which we're pretty pleased about. So this year, later, I mean, now we're already in second half of the year, but late in the next few months, we're going to start creating more physical workshops around this. So getting people again to understand the 10 dimensions of wellness. And then this time there's this whole element of like, hey, getting people to come together to create decals together as well. And then we're going to have a launch next year. And this time we're going to reach 6 libraries instead of just one library. Yeah, so this one is less of a program, a bit of a program, but more of like a project that we are doing on the side as well. Yeah, and so apart from all the things that I've told you about, some of the key people that we work with is NUS, NUH. We have run we just ran a program for them. We're going to run another one in the next few weeks. There are also NTU, SMU, ACJC, Hua Chong Institution. We ran the Rest for Wellness program with them. Queensway, we ran the Rest for Wellness program with them as well. So yeah, quite a lot of schools, community centers. There's a lot. Kolam Aya, Queenstown. Very very pleased that people want to work with us and are interested to, just either piloting or experimenting with some of the stuff that we provide to them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really amazing to hear that you know the industry leaders are really jumping on board and find the importance of the mental well-being,
yeah,
for their students or staff
yeah.
and organizations altogether. And actually, I just saw you guys did a wellness planning talk for Singapore Mental Health Film Festival. That's really nice to see as well. And
Yes.
in terms of just the programs you offer, is it just like strictly talks, or is there more of an interactive basis where they're able to kind of, you know, chime in and kind of talk about their own experience and challenges that they may have?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. It's a mix of a lot of different things. There is, of course, the content sharing, knowledge sharing part where it's mostly us just presenting. But after every segment of presentation, there is always like a discussion. So it's either a group discussion where, for example, the Rest for Wellness program, all of the students, we typically go to the schools with like, 60 students in one batch, for example. Sounds like a lot, but every group have about 8 students, and every group of 8 students have one facilitator from our side to guide their conversations and guide the discussions within each smaller group. So yeah, the discussions will either be within the group or to the wider group using like an interactive platform like Mentimeter or Slido or something like that. But essentially, the idea is not just for us to talk about what wellness or mental health is, but also really for the students to like, hey, oh, this is what I'm learning now, and this is how I can apply that knowledge into my life, and see if there are parallels that are happening between both. And we do see that like the students really understand a bit better when we do it that way.
Yeah, that's really nice. So you've given them some tools that could essentially, after the talks are done, they're able to take home with them for the rest of their lives, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
That's nice. Do you have any kind of certain stories that really touched you when you did these programs and you're like, wow, like today I really made a difference?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. Um, I think one of the few um types. I won't say types, but like there is always, a group of students who are like, hey, one of my family member is experiencing very, very similar signs and symptoms to what you have shared today. And now knowing that information and realizing that like they might need support beyond us, or we might bring them, to seek more professional help. And I think these stories really make a difference. And yeah, there were definitely, we always try to incorporate trigger warnings into our courses, because there are some videos that could be a bit more triggering for young students, especially when they feel it but they don't necessarily always understand it. And yeah, we have students who left the classroom before because of them being triggered, and then going to talk to them, we realize that, oh, it's because like this is happening in their family. And yeah, and so some students came up to us and say like, "Hey, I've been having anxiety when this happens." I'm like, "Okay, cool. Who are you talking to?" So I think it's all of this like small little bit of difference that we are making, that to me it feels really meaningful. Like we don't expect to go in and do a 10-hour program and change someone's life entirely. Like that's not really how it works. And to be honest, if the students do come for our 10 hours program and then walk away not retaining any of it or practicing any of the different tools and frameworks, it wouldn't really help them. So I think when students come to us and say like, hey, like last week what you said, I tried it, that is really cool. Even if like even if what they did was like small, like a small change, like maybe they packed their room or they slept earlier. So like last week when I ran a program for the Rest for Wellness for Pongo CC, there was this young boy. He said that like he has been gaming till like 3, 4 a.m. at night a lot and sometimes missing classes. And I made him pinky promise me that he will sleep at 12:10 for this whole week. So tomorrow I'm going to be running the next session with them again. Let's see if he actually slept at 12:10. And I
Yeah,
mean, honestly, if he doesn't, it doesn't really matter because, like, I mean, it matters, but it doesn't, like, no one really expects him to change within a week. But if he changes, hey, that's cool. And that's pretty awesome. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, to change, you have to kind of put it into the world first, and something you're sharing is, it's very new to them when it comes to youth, like, especially right there. The world's so small, and just being aware that they have this issue about gaming. For example, I used to be a gamer too, so I did have to sleep late. So I see where he's coming from, and yeah, just making an effort, I think, is already a good first step, and just actively taking charge of your life, and understanding the mindfulness that you guys are teaching, to say, this is something I'm struggling with, and at least working towards,
Yeah.
and I'm not just putting it aside and kind of running away from it. And that's I think that's where change happens. Without facing and acknowledging that you have an issue, you can't really make any change, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And like people don't, sometimes I feel like this awareness is often overlooked. Like people don't really see like, hey, me knowing that something is wrong is important. Then they always like, oh, but I haven't done anything yet. I haven't done anything yet. I'm like, hey, the fact that you know you haven't done anything yet, and the fact that you know that there's something off about it, that's pretty good. Most times, very often, um, people just go through life and go through the motions because we are all so busy in our lives, right? And sometimes, like I feel like whenever we come in, people are like, oh my gosh, this is another few check boxes I have to put onto my list of tasks that I have to do day to day. Um, which is why we try not to tell people to do too much, as strange as it is and as counterintuitive as it is. We're always telling people just find one thing, two things, that you can try, and then go from there. Yeah, and with what you just talked about, right, the awareness, like the wellness planning talk is all around that. It's about getting people to reflect on situations that they might encounter, and situations, looking back in the past and thinking about situations they have encountered and seeing how they can better approach some of those situations. Yeah, so reflection is actually quite important.
Hey there, amazing listeners. Before we dive deeper in today's insightful conversation, I want to take a quick moment to give a shout out to the driving force behind this podcast, my very own mental health focused creative production agency, Calvin Wong Media. As you know, creating wellness moments is all about exploring the depths of the human psyche and fostering personal growth. And guess what? It would not be possible if it were not for Calvin Wong Media. We conceptualize, humanize, and bring your story to life using unique storytelling techniques that engages the audience. So, the next time you're inspired by an episode or find yourself engaged in a thought-provoking conversation here, remember, that's the result of the support of Calvin Wong Media and its lovely kinds. If you're looking to amplify your message, tell your story with authenticity, and connect with your audience on a deeper level, reach out to us at calvinwongmedia.com. Now back to the conversation on creating wellness moments. Absolutely. Yeah, in regards
Yeah.
to reflection, I just want to touch a little bit on, what are the challenges in terms of, as an organization such as yourself, and
Yeah.
a grander scheme of things for mental health and wellness that you see that essentially need to be tackled, and, how are you guys taking actions and steps to do that?
Yeah. Um, that's a good question. I would say that it's always gonna come back to this idea of prevention that we are so big on. So you'll hear this word come up quite a bit. But yeah, this prevention, like I think prevention in the mental health space when we started was not something that people focused on at all. So no funding was going to that area. Even if there were funding, it was going to like much bigger players who have been in the space for a long, long time. People don't really see value back then. Um, about how why is prevention important when we don't see the impact now. For example, Singapore is quite strong on the ROI KPI perspective, so prevention, you don't really see those numbers, like you see like, oh, this person have went to this therapy and now they can hold a job, so on and so forth. So yeah, that was our biggest struggle back then. Funding and partnerships. Partnerships, I think, I won't talk too much about partnerships because I think starting out, everybody will struggle with partnerships, and it is kind of what one should expect starting an initiative. Like, how do you create collaborations that are both mutually beneficial rather than beneficial just one way? Like sometimes when you come in as a small organization, people are like, oh, are we just going to be providing all the resources for you? So I will always and forever be very, very thankful to our first few partners. So those are like IMH, for example. Yeah, so thankful that they believed in us and want to support what we do. Care Corner for opening up spaces for us to run our programs and events. Um, Queenstown, for example, and Kolam Aya. So those two CCs, we have had a relationship with them before. So, so they kind of believe in us, and we have that rapport going. So that's great. So, very, very thankful to all of these like initial partners that really kickstarted what we do and also build credibility within the space, I think. Yeah, and with regards to partnerships, I think one of the things that I'm realizing is super, super important is again this like, okay, we have this skill set, you have this skill set. How do we combine these skill sets plus our KPIs to move forward together? Yeah, unfortunately, like, doing initiatives like that, it can be also a bit more practical where KPIs, if you meet a partner's KPIs as well, then that makes the partnership conversation a lot easier. And that kind of alludes me to our current challenges as well and potential challenges in the future, right? Partnerships is not something that you create and then it will sustain. Oh, actually, the last partner that I just suddenly remember that I completely missed talking about is NYC. Yes, thank you very much, NYC, for giving us funding and also believing in us. And MCCY, there are a few staff people there who, yes, have been super supportive of what we do at TWIS. So very grateful to them as well. But yeah, I think that, one thing that we are seeing that we will have to work even more on is even more collaboration, right? And that's the thing about collaboration. Our team is kind of small, we aren't a very big team, but in order to keep us sustainable, we have to keep building our collaboration, and the collaboration that we have currently can't really, you know, dwindle. Is not dwindling yet. So it's like, adding on a bit more workload. But yeah, I think because we want to grow and because we want to scale up, it's very, very exciting, yet sometimes stressful. But yeah, I'm enjoying the process, and it's good. It's just if we can have more people, reaching out to us for like, hey, would you be able to run a program with us here and there? That would be so, so helpful. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
the other thing is that yeah, like, I think in prevention, one of the things that we also want to think about is what is the real impact that we're looking at, because it's a lot less visible than intervention. And so it's keeping in mind that, like, hey, although we don't see the effects, like huge changes in people's life, it's really the increase in knowledge, increase in awareness that in the space that, like, we are like, hey, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, in terms of prevention, it's if you don't see it, that's how you kind of know you did a good job. If there's no, negative side effects of like for example, like increase of suicides like last year was a bit of an issue for Singapore right now. And if you're able to prevent some of these things happening, you wouldn't really kind of see the statistics in a sense because they're thankfully living healthier lives because of you and collaborations, right, that you guys have done. I always like seeing, you know, organizations coming together to create like a win-win relationship, especially
Mm.
when it allows not only for the KPI, but as well as the benefiting the end user,
Oh
such
yeah.
as like the students. Um, and I
Yeah.
just wanted to kind of transfer over to, right now, I would say with mental health and wellness, there's still a lot of stigma behind it. And
Yes.
what are the ways that you think are beneficial to essentially help? I don't really like using the word normalize, but lack of better word, normalize or reduce the stigma that's kind of surrounding this topic.
Yeah. I think one of the main things is apart from okay, so I think increasing awareness definitely helps, right? So really clarifying like what mental health conditions are and are not is super important. I think we as a society have been talking about it a lot more, but honestly when we go to schools and work with youths, for example, like there are a lot of times where people are like, oh, wellness, like what is that? Mental health, what is that? So sometimes being in the mental health space, we're like, oh, a lot of people are educated on wellness, but when you really go out there, like the level of understanding is not very mature yet. And that makes sense. Like Singapore have just kind of started in the past like 1.5 years, 2 years to talk about this. So a lot of effort have to be put into really raising the bar for understanding what mental health is and how we can support it, even when we ourselves might not have a personal experience or um yeah a personal experience or in-depth understanding of the issue. It's about being understanding that like, hey, there are different people who have different needs and different ways of reacting to things and different ways of thinking and processing of emotions and all of these different things, and then how do we understand that they are you know um yeah, understand that they are I mean, honestly, even within like non-mental health, like people with with no mental health issues, like we are all different, right? So it's really increasing the understanding and empathy among different people. And then from there, if we see that like, hey, actually people with mental health conditions function exactly like us, on a normal good day, then we will see like there is nothing to be against or afraid of, and we can kind of slowly go forward from there. I think the stigma that exists now is every time when we think about someone with mental health condition, we are thinking about the extreme ends, where maybe there is someone yelling in the streets or someone being very violent or suicide and things like that. But a lot of times mental health issues and mental health conditions don't come up that way, right? Like a lot of us who would be viewed as normal people suffer from mental health conditions. They're just very hidden and it's very silent. It's like you mentioned suicide. There are so many anecdotal evidence from my friends, family, people extended, but also acquaintances who have said like, I was just having a meal with my friend or my friend's brother, a week before he committed suicide and or he attempted, and it's so prevalent. And that's the thing, right? Like if you didn't know, it's invisible. The ones that we see are visible, but there's a very small proportion of the amount of mental health out there. So yeah, in order to reduce things like the suicide rates and all of this stigma against mental health, I think it's just the understanding that like maybe we are viewing them in a different light and in a light that is not very accurate to who they are.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that and being aware of, essentially, not everyone might be struggling and they're able to put up this essentially like a front more or less to seem normal,
Yeah.
uh, for lack of a better term. Like, yeah, I actually really relate to, talking about this because yeah, one of my best friends, she took her life, and like it was just a week ago where before she passed, I was just having dinner with her, and it's we didn't have any signs that this was gonna happen, and you never think this kind of thing will happen to you until it does, right? So the work you're doing and how, just to check in and make sure people are well is so much more important than I don't want to say so much more important than but prevention, yeah, as you said, is so much. like there's such a need for that, so people don't end up in the crisis state. And if we're able to prevent anything, it's a lot easier, as you said, than when people get to a stage where it's a lot harder to reverse, right?
Yeah. I'm so sorry to hear about your friend.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, but it's, I would say, because of this event that happened, I'm a lot more aware and empathetic to people's situations, and it's impacting my life in a way that I'll say, you know, she made me a better person because of that. If I wasn't able to have that experience, I would not be as aware in terms of mental wellness or mental well-being or health in general. So at least she had that impact on me, and I'm sure a few other people that are in our circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, it's always not it's not easy, I think, being yeah, especially if you've met her, shortly before and things like that. So yes. They do make us better people, don't they?
Hmm. Of
Yeah.
course. And in terms of like the mental health landscape, we just talked a little bit about how there is more awareness these
Mhm,
days, but I also see that in terms of social media, they're in a way bringing more awareness,
mhm.
but there's also that comes along with it some misguided information. And what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I'm actually quite glad you brought that up. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think social media is a huge thing. I've done like certain panels on this before around social media and its impacts. And apart from, I think, the mainstream stuff that we always talk about, how social media takes over our lives and we spend a bit too much time on social media because and comparisons, affect mental health and all that. I think those are the common stuff. But you're absolutely right. There are a lot of information out there that is not very accurate. And I think because of how prevalent mental health is as a topic, some, you know, brands and some companies are using it as leverage as well to either sell more products and things like that. And so, yeah, there is a lot of false information, or I would say half truth, right? So there will always be like truth in like different things that we see, but when the whole message is not accurate and not an accurate representation of like mental health and the situation, what we're doing is then polarizing even more, right? Because now we're like, oh, that is true about mental health, and we're like, oh, suddenly we feel like we know a lot more about mental health, but we aren't. We're just knowing a lot more about the wrong information on mental health, and people think that that would, oh, as long as people are talking about it, that's fine. Not really. um, so yeah, at TWIS, we have a lot of social media content that goes out. Every week, we normally put about 2 to 3 different posts. And because of this fact, all of the stuff that we put out are very well researched or, research back, at least have some studies behind the things that we put out. And so we try to counter the false information out there with more accurate information. But yeah, I mean, I think at our the speed that we put things out, and also because it's more educational, people tend to not look at it. That's the other thing. I can talk a lot more about that, but that's the thing. Like, in order to capture someone's attention, it needs to be like mind blowing a little bit, or something that tugs at either our excitement, fear, or stuff like that, and because of that, the messaging gets lost. So maybe the intention of some of this posts and some of these creators aren't malicious, but in order to get the views, it becomes inaccurate and hence counterproductive. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I know you guys have quite a few volunteers that are in the space.
Mm.
Other students or professionals that are still going for their masters. That's correct.
Yeah, yeah, we have about 130 and counting volunteers now. A lot of them, well, when we started, about 90% of them are psychology, either majors, graduates, PhDs, so on and so forth. Now, I think the percentage is slightly lower, about maybe 70%, 80%. Our research and writers are normally psychology students, but now we have like more media students, creative students coming in for like the social media aspect of it, and also program management side of things as well. So yeah, now we're having more of a bit of a balance, but I think everybody within TWIS are quite passionate about mental health and making sure that the content we put out are robust and good. Yeah,
Yeah,
and so thankful for them. Like I don't think we'll get to where we are now without them. Yeah, so
yeah, it's lovely to hear that you guys are taking a step in the right direction and delivering content that is backed by science and proper research, right? And you mentioned earlier there's some upcoming workshops, live workshops that are happening soon. Can we know a little bit more about those?
sure. So we do run. Now we're starting to work with community centers around Singapore to run rest for the public. Some of them are like because of one of our partners is Care Corner. So again, Care Corner will be doing it. So anyone staying in like the more Woodlands area or Yishun, that area, they can sign up for the Care Corner program. So that is the rest program, but for the public this time. It's going to be about 10-ish hours. We are doing it over 2 different days. So I believe that the dates are sometime in September. If you go on to our social media, you'll be able to find all the different dates there. So our Instagram, LinkedIn, yeah, Telegram, things like that. They will have those information. Some of the other programs that we're running is Rest for Pongo. So we're also doing a run for Pongo, but that one is kind of like it's already in the works. So might need to join the next time. And I think the next one that they are running is in a few months' time. We also do, we are also doing a stress workshop for NUH in about 3 weeks. Yes. So yeah, that one we can find. And that one is more of a private program. But one that is open that is upcoming is this quite fun card games festival that we're running, or card games challenge. Actually, you know what? I will not say card games, but board game challenge. So the idea is that people can come play some board games, increase their social wellness. But also, it is like a volunteer group, so you get to meet volunteers from different organizations, and kind of learn from like the different initiatives that people are running, and also they work a lot with elderly. So if anyone wants to volunteer with the elderly in the future, yeah, that's one place to go to. Also in Yishun, this one. The details will be out on our social media very soon.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the listeners that don't know, what are your actual social media channels? What's the website or LinkedIn or IG that they could go to check you guys out?
That's a good question. I don't want to say it wrongly, so I'm just going to look at it right now. But for Instagram is Total Wellness SG. So it's TOTALWELLNESSSG. So it's triple
Yeah,
S.
I
Yeah.
will be sure to put these on screen so we don't make the mistake of going to the wrong place.
Yes, I'll send you the links as well, so it's just easy
Perfect.
for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah,
Mhm.
before we take off, you're doing a lot of community involvement, and there's so much I actually still want to chat with you about. But in terms of like how much, in terms of like community involvement and having a community, like what does that like? What kind of impact does that have on mental well-being? Just to have that community and not being so isolated, especially when you're in a place that is not in the best state, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I think there are two fronts to that question. So the first one is a lot of the participants that come to our programs, they always tell us like, "Hey, thank you so much for creating these programs because I get to experience something new that I would not have tried if not for you organizing something." So we have done a lot of different programs for the community, such as like going out and doing like a trek, a walk at Clementi Woods, for example, or like a weaving workshop. So what we try to do for the events that we hold in community spaces are things that are new, that are different from what people might do, or people things that people might want to try. And then if people join us, they get to learn something new, experience something new. So there's more intellectual wellness, but also people have made friends in our programs before, and then they come back together, which is kind of cute. So yeah, like I think it's like creating that community where people share and people like talk to each other, and not saying they're isolated. Yeah, some of them are a bit more isolated due to different circumstances in their life, and I'm glad to be able to provide them with a place where they are like, okay, feel safe. They can go. They know that it's not very high stress. They don't have to be a certain way. Yeah, and there are many, many different types of people that come to our programs, and they're all slightly different. I still remember there are some programs where people brought their families in. So it's like the parents and the kids, and then the brother and the sister, and they're not like little kids. They are like 15, 20 years old, kind of like kids. I've seen kids because there's parents involved. And yeah, and there was another program where um someone a guy from poly brought his little girl, little sister into our program as well. So it's quite nice when you see intergenerational bonding. But yeah, it's just a place where people can come, have fun, learn something. The main output that we wanted to achieve when we started these events, though, which is kind of important, is the fact that we wanted to make it fun so that we can attract people to come, and then we slot in some wellness stuff into it. But also we wanted them to be able to explore something, and if they enjoy it so much that it sticks, yay, we kind of have done our job. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. And if you guys are an organization or a school or anything like that that wants to get involved with TWIS, be sure to reach out to Charmaine, or I'll put all their socials and stuff on the screen so you guys can reach out.
Yeah,
And in closing, thank you guys so much for joining the Creative Wellness Moments podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing your story and what you guys do at TWIS.
thank you so much, Kelvin. I really appreciate this as well. And yeah, thank you.